Now what will it be? Death or exile?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow film exiles out there, and welcome to this discussion / review / analysis for Predestination. I'm joined today by Brandon. Brandon, you recently watched this film. I saw the film when it came out in 2013. I've sat with the film and thought about it for several years. As a matter of fact, it's one of my favorite films of all time. I'm yours truly, Lupe. Brandon, would you like to say hello to our listeners?
Hey, how's everybody doing?
Cool. All right. So, Predestination, released in 2013. It's a mystery / thriller / sci-fi film, and it was directed by the Speirig brothers. And the Speirig brothers, other notable things they've done, they did Daybreakers in 2009 with Ethan Hawke, who's the star of this movie, and they also did Jigsaw in 2017. Interestingly, Predestination is written by the Speirig brothers. They also produced it. They also worked on the musical score, and they did the visual effects for the movie. So these guys are artists extraordinaire, and they have their hands in several pies. Obviously, they collaborated with other people, but just to be able to have all these talents and bring them to bear on this film is pretty freaking remarkable. It stars Ethan Hawke. It stars Sarah Snook as well, in two brilliant performances. We'll talk more about that. And a brief synopsis of the film is this. In New York City, amidst the looming threat of a serial bomber, a bar patron walks into a bar for a stiff one. He strikes up a conversation with a mysterious and probing bartender who asks him about his life story. Their conversation leads to the bartender asking, "What if I could put him in front of you, the man that ruined your life? If I could guarantee that you'd get away with it, would you kill him?" And so the mystery unfolds, and we get the film Predestination. So we're going to talk about this film. We're going to review it. Our first section of it is going to be, touching on it lightly. It's going to be spoiler free, if you will. And then we're going to go into like deeper analysis and a full spoilery explanation and discussion about it. If there's anything that puzzles you about the film, if you want to discuss the film, talk about it a bit more with people who love it or like it or dislike it, you'll find out. We'll get into that. So, Brandon, first thing I got to ask you, overall general thoughts on how did you come to watch the film and how did you find the film? Give us your brief thoughts.
So I've known about this movie since it came out. I remember it coming out to digital and Blu-ray, and I remember hearing how great it was. Mm-hmm. And I bought it at that time based on that review 7 years ago.
Wow.
Never watched it. It was just one of those things that every time I went by the list, I was like, I'll eventually watch that. But I always just kept on scrolling. And then based on your recommendation on things that we had watched recently, you said, okay, well, you have to watch this. And I knew nothing about the movie. I did not read a synopsis. I did not watch the trailer because I don't do that when I'm just explicitly told to watch a movie. Mm-hmm. I like to go in not knowing anything. All I knew is it had Ethan Hawke, and that was it. Mm-hmm. And then one of my good buddies, who I told that I had been instructed to watch it, watched it right before I did, and then messaged me. He's like, "Yeah, this was great." So I sat down. I put down my phone and I watched it all the way through without any distractions, and it was great. It was it's odd at some points. It's a little uncomfortable at some points. It's beautiful at some points. Mm-hmm. And it's mind bending at many points. Yeah. In a way that's hard to describe. Mm-hmm. But overall, yeah, very, very smartly made movie. There's a lot of passion in it from everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell from every aspect that it feels like a bigger movie than it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's incredibly smart, and it makes you feel dumb for how smart it is.
Yeah. I love that about it.
But not in like a Christopher Nolan kind of way where you walk out and you say, "Wow, I'm stupid." You just walk out saying, "What is going on?" Like, left is right, cats are eating dogs, and it's raining mermaids. Like, I don't know what is happening in the universe right now.
Yeah.
And I love that about it. I love a movie that doesn't just end and it's all buttoned up nicely, and then you can go on forgetting about it for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For me, my story with the film is it came out in 2013, and that's the same year that Christopher Nolan's Interstellar came out. Christopher Nolan, he's one of my favorite directors because he makes movies that are blockbuster entertainment, but they're very, very intelligent. And that year, Interstellar was massively hyped. Warner Brothers studio put all their money behind the marketing of the film. There were so many behind the scenes documentaries and infomercials and talk about it being like one of the great sci-fi movies of all time. And after I saw the film, I was a little bit disappointed. Not to say it's not a good film, because actually I've come to love the film more and more over the years, but the hype for that film was just not something that any film could live up to. And that year, I didn't hear anything about Predestination. Never saw a trailer, never saw any articles, any hype on it, nothing. And one day I was searching for something to watch, and I see Predestination starring Ethan Hawke. Now, Ethan Hawke is one of the best actors that we got working today. He's a guy who, anything he's in, I will give a chance. Not every movie he's in is great, but generally he has really good taste. He picks really good scripts and works with really good filmmakers. And I just decided, you know what? I've never heard anything about this movie. Why don't I keep that veil of mystery and just go in and just watch the film? I'm not going to watch a trailer or see if it's good or not. And mind blown. Absolute mind blown. It was as if I'm talking about, this is like the greatest mind fuck of my life. I feel like I was wined and dined and seduced, and the movie just fucked my brain to smithereens in the best way possible. And Predestination is one of my favorite movies of all time. One of my top 10 movies of all time. I always recommend it to people whenever I can, because I feel it's a cult classic. I feel it is a masterpiece. Over the years, having sat with it and thought about it, I'm convinced that it's one of the best science fiction movies of all time. So let's go into more specific things that we like or dislike about the movie. And we can start with acting performances. So the movie stars Sarah Snook. It stars Ethan Hawke, and it stars a bunch of other characters who aren't like major characters. Brandon, what did you think of the acting performances? And were there any standouts to you, or were there any people that didn't do a great job? What do you think?
So we just to clarify, we are in full spoiler territory now.
Well,
correct?
no, we're not yet in spoiler territory.
Okay, just just making sure. So
Yeah.
I'll keep this a little bit more light. So there's Ethan Hawke is, like you said, he's pretty much always great. Not every movie he's in is great, but he always adds a gravitas to a movie that can't be mistaken. And he's always very likable. He's easy to get into his shoes. And as you know, as the barkeep, he's excellent. He does a really good job, and especially when you learn what his motives are, what he's got going on. It just, you can go back and watch again and see what he was doing purposefully, which plays out really well. But the real star of this one is Sarah Snook.
Mm.
She's excellent, and she's got multiple roles to play, and she plays all of them excellently. And it's you can't say much more than that without getting to the spoiler territory. But um, every part of the role that she plays, you believe it 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And then even the way she crosses with Ethan Hawke is it all just makes sense and it works. And she should definitely. I mean, it's surprising that she did not get more work after this, because what she does with her roles is just fantastic.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. I'm going to back you up on both of those. One thing that's interesting about the plot and the structure of the film is that the conversation between Ethan Hawke as a bartender slash barkeep and Sarah Snook as a bar patron, it takes up a huge portion of the film. Maybe probably like the first 30 or 40 minutes. And she's telling him a story. Obviously, she narrates and they cut to the events, and it goes back and forth. So you get a lot of time with them, and it's just them talking to each other. And they're so good. Their chemistry, their intensity, their actions and reactions to each other, how they act with their body language, with their eyes, facial expressions. Ethan Hawke is a fine actor, and Sarah Snook, who in this movie she's a newbie. She's not a big actor. She's not done anything of note to this point, and she meets Ethan Hawke at that amazing A level. She's an Australian actress, and now she's on HBO's Succession. So she's doing a really good job there. But if you really want to see her flex her muscles, you have to watch Predestination. And what she does there is just it's utterly mind blowing. There's also a character called Mr. Robertson. He's the director of an agency. He's played by Noah Taylor. He's a British actor and is this sort of mysterious, shadowy figure. And I think he also did a very good job. He's not in the film a whole lot. He doesn't have a whole load of lines of dialogue, and he's not even very expressive or animated or, playing such huge dramatic parts. But there is an intensity to him. There is a stillness.
Comes across as a great father figure, and not only to directly to the character that he's involved with, but almost to the audience. He really carries a weight of feeling like the father of it all.
Of
And
it all,
he
absolutely.
he definitely he feels like your dad.
Yeah.
Throughout the movie, and that just works. Even though, like you said, he's not in it a lot, every time you see him, he's the kind of person that you do trust, that you believe what he says, and he's never misleading you. Mm-hmm. But there's always something more. He's always watching you in a different way, mm-hmm. and that is very father-like, and that plays into the movie, but mm-hmm. also the audience.
Absolutely. So he also did. I think that those are the three actors that did a spectacular job. There are very many small roles surrounded, but those are the three main actors, and they do a really good job. So what do you think of like the dialogue and the editing and the story, like the way it's told? There's narration, there's going back and forth, they're talking for a while, and then events happen. Like, did you get confused, or do you think it was well laid out? Could they have done it in a better way? What do you think of those elements of the storytelling?
So I mean, everything was well done. The editing was great. Yes, there is obvious confusion there, and I think that's unavoidable just with everything mm-hmm. that happens in the film. Mm-hmm. But there's enough clues there to where if you are paying attention and mm-hmm. you are looking for what to expect, you can find little things that help you set up later and be like, oh, I caught that before. Like I noticed that. Mm-hmm. The little details mm-hmm. That were really well done. The script is well written. Mm-hmm. The dialogue is great. The backstory is I think where it really shines when they're having the conversation mm-hmm. and it's being narrated by the patron. Mm-hmm. It's just it really is. It's almost fairy tale-esque. It's it's kind of a dark fairy tale,
Mm-hmm.
but in a movie, you kind of almost compare it to like Big Fish or even
Mm-hmm.
like Benjamin Button, where the
Yeah,
story is tragic and but still somehow
whimsical.
positive and whimsical, and it's almost beautiful, even though there's terrible things that happen for it. You feel bad for the character in the story, but again, that's what a good script, good dialogue, good narration is supposed to do,
Mm-hmm.
is put you into those shoes and make you feel bad for the characters if the movie's trying to make you feel bad for the characters.
Absolutely.
So across the board, that was all great.
Yeah, yeah. I'll back you up on this. That's one of the most impressive feats that the movie accomplishes. It's written from a short story called All You Zombies, a short sci-fi story, and it had to be expanded into this 2 hour, you know, cinematic piece. And there's a
I know
lot.
it's not about zombies.
Yeah, there.
It is the same guy who wrote Starship Troopers, though.
Yes, but it's not like Starship Troopers.
Oh,
Complete,
it's far different than Starship Troopers.
completely
But
different interpretation of the material. Completely different mood, tone. Completely different. But they're both sci-fi, which is might even be a bit of a spoiler to be sincere. But I think the way that the events are relayed, the way information is dropped and breadcrumbs, and the way the directors direct the audience towards the finale through this labyrinth of information and events is absolutely brilliant. The movie has two parts. The first is the huge chunk of dialogue between two characters, and then a forward propelling narrative. It's regular structure of things just happening, and those two parts, they fit together seamlessly. But at the same time, there is enough variety between them to sort of keep you surprised. And the part that stitches those two parts together is absolutely brilliant. And they did an amazing job right in this movie. I'm always so impressed whenever I think of what they achieved. So to wrap up our spoiler free review, what do you think about the like cinematography and the score, the lighting, all those sort of technical elements that make a film, a film?
so I mean, the cinematography was great. It wasn't anything that was mind blowing, but it didn't need to be. It
Mm-hmm.
felt like a smaller movie because it was a more personal story.
Mm-hmm.
It's not trying to be a big sci-fi movie, so it achieved what it was meant to. Visual effects were completely invisible. Most of it was all done in camera,
Mm-hmm.
with just little bits of set extension here or there, which I didn't even know until I watched the behind the scenes, which like Fincher does. You're always blown away when you get to the behind the scenes. You're like, that was a visual effect.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, like I didn't know that. Um, so yeah, I mean that was great. But the standout of all the technical things, the score was really great.
It
Um,
really was. It
it's
really.
electronic, which is kind of an odd choice for a character piece, but fits into the realm of sci-fi and kind of with the story. But there's moments of it that are really beautiful, and then there's moments of it that are really exciting,
Mm-hmm.
and it plays into the kind of the mind bendiness of what's happening in the structure of the film. But
Mm-hmm.
I remember consistently going through it and being like, wow, this score is really good.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you're just kind of surprised when you realize, well, it was the director that did
It
the
was,
score.
yeah. That's so crazy impressive that you can get like an amazing score like that, and it's done by the actual director. Like that's mind blowing.
And it's really cool because the directors are twin brothers. They look identical.
Yeah.
And they just kind of share duties, and it's funny watching behind the scenes, and they don't always agree on on how things should be.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't know which one is which, you kind of can't figure out which one's on your side or not. But they worked really well together, and it ends up just being a total package of something that just excels on so many levels because of a layer of passion from both of them.
Yeah. For me, the technical elements, absolutely brilliant. As I said, I will always compare this movie to Interstellar because it came out the same year as Interstellar. They're both sci-fi films. One was incredibly hyped, had all the money in the world, one of the most expensive films ever made. I think it was the most expensive film at the time that it came out. Had, this massive machine behind it. And then you have this very small movie made by two nondescript directors for small amounts of money. And they made it feel very cinematic, made it feel very crafty. The visual effects, the special effects, everything just works so well to make a very, very crafty film. So if you're talking of quality of filmmaking and craftsmanship, top notch. As I said, the score is one of the best scores out there for any film. Very memorable, very captivating, very evocative and transportive. And I couldn't speak highly enough of the job that they've done. So that ends our spoiler free section of the review. Overall, as I said, when I first watched the film, I called it a cult classic, and it is definitely a cult classic. Not a lot of people know about the film, and people who have seen it rave about it. But after sitting with it for years, I'm comfortable enough to say that this is a sci-fi masterpiece, without a doubt. One of the best movies ever made in its specific genre. And my advice to you would be, don't do too much research on it. Just go in and watch it and come back and watch our spoiler-filled discussion and have a talk with us. Are there any last words for our spoiler-free audience that you want to say?
Like I said at the beginning, and like you kind of said right now, is if you like good, simple as far as not flashy, sci-fi, something that's just got great character work. Don't do much research. Don't even read a synopsis of it. Really, we go with what we told you right there, and that should be more than enough. Don't watch the trailers. Just go in to say, hey, I'm going to watch this movie. You could probably get it for $5 now, and that's not much of a risk there, but it's best to go in knowing basically nothing.
Sure.
I think that's just the best way to experience, most movies nowadays that have a twist, but absolutely just go in, take our word for it, come back and listen to the spoiler talk, but it's you're going to enjoy it if you like anything that's more than just surface level character work.
Absolutely. All right. So there's the end of our spoiler-free section, and you can exit if you do not want full-blown spoilers. And as a matter of fact, if you haven't seen the movie, I demand that you do not listen to this section. This movie's just way too good. Just being surprised and being surprised by what happens in the movie is too good of a reward for you to spoil it with listening to our spoiler-filled section. So let's go into it. So one of the great things about this movie is that it's laden with thought-provoking themes, recurring symbols and motifs, and all these messages. So we're going to discuss a few of those. Now, one of the big spoilers of the movie is that it's a time travel film. I absolutely love that about the film. I love the fact that you go in not knowing it's about time travel, except if you've read synopses and seen the trailer, and then halfway through the film you find out, oh my goodness, like it's about time travel. And I think it's one of the best time travel films ever made. What do you think, Brandon?
Yeah, it's it's up there. It's I've watched it a little bit too recently to have thought about it enough to say if it's one of the best yet, but it's already one of the most thought-provoking, which leads me to believe that it's something that's going to stick with me for years.
Yeah.
It is a time travel movie, but it gets everything so right that you don't have to focus much on the time travel
Mhm.
because you're going to go cross-eyed trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and it's just the simple way, and it knows what it's doing.
yeah.
Uh, but that's part of the fun of it is
Mhm.
you're trying to double check their math, and
Mhm.
then when you realize that they're right, or
Mhm.
that you've already lost, and and they know what they're doing. Uh, it kind of reminds me of like Looper, where it just makes sense. It just
Mhm.
works. You don't have to
Mhm.
think about the time travel details
Yeah, absolutely.
because they know they put the work into it, so you don't have to.
You don't have to. And I really appreciate it. Time travel is a lot harder to do than a lot of people think. It's very easy to lose track of the internal logic of your story and leave some really gaping uh plot holes. And we could even see it with like movies like, for example, Endgame. Endgame, the biggest movie of all time, is notorious for having really bad time travel logic. But that's not a film that you would regard as a masterpiece or something very intellectual or really highbrow. And that's where this movie succeeds. Like after you watch it, you think like there is no way that the time loop is without flaw. There is no way. And the more you think about it and the more you see, oh my God, it's actually flawless. That just makes the movie even more impressive in your mind. Um, and talking about time travel and time loops, one of the themes of the movie, something that's talked about, is the snake that eats itself forever and ever. And yeah, I really want to talk about this because I'm somebody who's very interested in and very fond of mythology and a lot of like arcane, ancient mythological like symbols and motifs and these themes that have been used for since the beginning of mankind to describe these concepts that are difficult to wrestle with. And the snake that eats itself forever and ever is Ouroboros, and it comes from a Greek word which means aura, that's for a tail, and boros, which means eaten. It's one of the most ancient mystical symbols in the world, and it symbolizes infinity and the cyclical nature of the universe, creation out of destruction, destruction leading to creation, the circle of life, life coming out of death. So the Ouroboros eats its own tail to sustain its life in an eternal cycle of revival. And it's a mystical concept that teaches us that life doesn't end. Even when you die, you will be reborn. When living things perish, they breathe life back into the universe. And it's the same sort of physical law of no energy is lost. It's only transferred from one form to another. And there's also this concept of the power of death making and life giving are one inside all of us. So all these concepts, they are sort of like spiritual esoteric concepts that are very, very hard to describe, to define. They're intangible. We don't have scientific, facts and figures to explain them. And so we use myths and we use motifs and we use these symbols to describe these things that are larger than life and are so existential. And so this is a recurring theme in the movie. Obviously, the character who represents the Ouroboros is Ethan Hawke and Sarah Snook's character in one. And I just think that it's very clever and it's really cool to explore this mythological concept through this sci-fi film. What do you think about that, Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, as far as that goes, it's just it really works as far as that loop goes.
Mm-hmm.
And every time they add another layer, another aspect to that loop, you're kind of blown away again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, how it all comes together, and uh, it's just it's so many times across. I mean, a lot of times you go to time travel movies, and they talk about you. Well, you don't run into yourself because it will create a paradox. It will, implode the universe, whatever. Oh, this movie obviously doesn't subscribe to that.
Yeah.
It's all about meeting yourself, and the
Mhm.
entire movie is with multiple versions of oneself, and neither one of them doesn't know it yet.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
and then when they add the layer of creating the future with yourself
Mhm.
and then that becoming yourself later, again, there's so many layers that almost drive you nuts because you're just trying to figure out how it's possible.
Mhm.
But it's a self-feeding loop
Mhm.
that every time it comes to an end, it goes back to its beginning,
Mhm.
um, and just continues on. And it's just, it really is when you talk about it, as far as the idea of all energy is not lost, it's just transferred.
Mhm.
In this case, it's not transferred to anything else, it's transferred back into that
Back
same
in,
loop.
absolutely.
And it's nuts, it's completely it's,
It,
it's
it is.
completely crazy.
It is.
uh and like I said, every time they would just add another layer, you're just like, what is going on? Like, how is this possible? And it was.
Yeah, I think another important sort of theme of the film is paradoxes, and I'm someone who I enjoy exploring paradoxes and exploring dramatic irony. Two things that exist at the same time, but they exist in opposition of each other. When one exists, you expect that the other shouldn't exist, but they're existing at the same time, and this sort of tension and this sort of thing that's not supposed to exist together that your mind just wrestles with, it's very engaging to me, and those are some of the largest mysteries of the universe that we have, and I love how we can use film and storytelling to explore these paradoxes, and that's something that this film strives to do, is to give your brain that exercise. And I find like a lot of people get frustrated with paradoxes, but for me it doesn't frustrate me. For me it makes me marvel at the wonder of the universe and the wonder of our existence, and it piques that spirit of wonder and that almost childlike bliss of not knowing, but wanting to. And I think that this film did like an amazing job of just exploring the concept of paradox. And at some level, for you to enjoy this film, you have to be okay with paradoxes existing and understanding that they do. Paradoxes that we talk about, for example, understanding that within everyone is the power to give life, and at the same time is the power to give death, and the fact that time, we don't fully understand what time is and where it begins and where it ends, and all these interesting things. It's important, I feel, and I found that a lot of people are not able to hold two thoughts in their heads, two competing thoughts in their heads. And I think part of becoming more mature as an intellectual person is being able to come to peace with two competing thoughts existing in your mind at the same time.
It's being okay understanding that you may not understand everything, that you may
Exactly.
not get everything, and that's okay. Not You don't have to understand everything for that to have existed.
Exactly.
Um, at some point, it kind of reminds me of Arrival by Denis Villeneuve,
Mm,
when they're
mm,
trying to figure out everything that's happening, and
mm,
the only way that they figure it out is that the time is not linear
mm,
to these creatures, that
mm,
they view time as a loop, as a direction, not as like we do, where everything is derived going forward only.
mm,
And this is kind of the same thing as that, is everything is told in a loop.
mhm,
So for everybody around this, all they are perceiving is what is happening in a straightforward line. But
mhm,
once you can see the circle, once you can see the loop, you may not fully understand it, but you understand that there is a loop, and that there
mhm,
is uh, there is something more I mean, paradoxical going on that is again just kind of greater than the single line of time.
Yeah, yeah. So, do you want to talk about there's a quote, uh, a riddle in the film. It's a riddle in life in general. What came first, the chicken or the egg? Do you want to talk more about that concept? That's another paradox, and there might be a little bit of an answer to that.
Yeah, and I mean that's my one biggest question on this film that I don't see as a problem. It's me who is not a scientist or an astrophysicist or whatever, trying to figure out the idea of a time paradox. Is
Mm-hmm.
that I mean the basis of this story is that the characters are one and the same, and at each juncture in their life they meet an opposite version of themselves, not knowing that is another version, and
Mm-hmm.
then they create life together, which becomes them at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
um, Now, the hard question is that, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Is where does this timeline truly begin?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, how is it a self-feeding loop if there is no beginning? But
Mm-hmm.
at some point, there is a beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know that if I'm able to see the beginning, and I think that is what drives me crazy. Is I don't know where the entryway to the roundabout is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a roundabout with no way to get in.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Traffic is moving. Traffic is continuing in this circle that never ends. But
Mm-hmm.
at some point, is there an entry or an exit? And I mean, the movie is, yeah, I mean, you can't deviate from that. Otherwise, it might have drastic impact
Mm-hmm.
on the events of the world. So
Yeah.
this loop must continue.
Mm-hmm.
But where does it start? And what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Well, I mean, it's the rooster, but I don't really understand that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to. I need to. I want to see more of what is happening. And again, it's not a draw in the movie. It's blowing my mind. It's
Mm-hmm.
causing me migraines trying to
Right.
figure this out. Like that meme of Charlie Day going through his conspiracy theories of what's
Yeah.
happening. I
Yeah.
I I know that there has to be an answer, but I don't know if I'm smart enough
Mm-hmm.
to get the answer myself. And I don't feel dumb because of it.
Mm-hmm.
I I just feel like there is a mystery, and that is the point of a paradox.
Mm-hmm.
Is you're not going to get it. You you just can't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe you could shed some light on it, but
Well,
I don't know.
well, for me, as I said, I've sat with this movie for years, and I think on it time and time again, and I've come to some theories. And a theory is all it is it's a hypothesis, it's a guess. I don't have any concrete evidence, but I think I have some convincing arguments. So there are two ways to look at the answer to the riddle. So the first thing is that using your analogy of a roundabout with no exit or entry, but with cars just going round and round, there needs to be someone who puts the cars on the track first and then makes the loop, and then the cars go in that loop, or there needs to be someone who creates the cars, so to speak. So I think that the character, all right, Sir Snook and Ethan Hawke's same character, did have parents who gave birth to her, but she was born with a special with a special condition. Her being an hermaphrodite is a special condition that allows her to be able to go through her life, and then her sex change also allows her to be able to have sex with herself, with their self, um, during the appropriate time to give birth to themselves again. So I think that it's just that time. Think of it as time is going in a straight line, whatever. We all know time is actually like a circle, but if you're looking at a big circle, at one point it may seem like a straight line. And then the rooster, the character who's a rooster in this story is Noah Taylor's character, Mr. Robertson, the director of the shadowy agency. So he's the one that inserts the loop into the the progression of time. So he's the one that makes her be able to exist over and over and over and over and over again, and die and come back and die and be, and on that roundabout. So yes, the answer is the rooster. There has to be an outside force that makes this loop happen, and the outside force is Noah Taylor. The fact that it's a loop does not negate the fact that she did have parents who gave birth to her before. It's just that now that now that they have sex with themselves, their offspring will always be them. So that
brings into question if their parents were originally two separate parents who gave birth to this child, would that child not have been different? Because at that point, no two DNAs are ever going to combine the same. So once you create that loop, something would change, because that DNA would no longer be involved.
Their parents are no part of the loop. Like, their parents just continue. So their parents,
they continue, but they would have had to be the initial creators of the first child, of the first baby.
Exactly. And then
but when it becomes self-feeding,
exactly. So biologically their parents were, but metaphysically the real parent is Noah Taylor, because he's the one that initiates this self-replication and this loop. So the fact that they exist is not negated by the fact that they had parents. So as I said, like, you can explain it using, A, C, and B. If person A and person C meet together and have a baby, they'll have person B. So person B does exist. Now, if person B meets with person B and has a baby, the child is not going to be A or C. It's going to be person B. And then person B meets with person B again. And so A and C are no longer on the loop. They're out of the equation, because the rooster came in and created a loop where B will only meet B and continue in this cycle. So I'll tell you, like, I'll give you time to think on it. The more you think on it, you'll come up with your own theories, or probably you'll agree with mine. But that's how I rationalize it. And talking about the loop and there's a message of transgenderism in this, and can you speak to any of that? It doesn't overtly sell itself as a transgender film. As a matter of fact, that's one of the spoilers and one of the things that must be hidden from the film. But how do you speak to the theme of transgenderism and non-binary genderism in the film?
I mean, it's an interesting approach, and I think the film handled it well, and the filmmakers handled it well, as not trying to cast a man as the post sex change, and trying to change who the actor was for the second part, because I mean, essentially they are the same person, and I think that they explained it well at the beginning, that they always felt like somebody else they were living in somebody else's body. And essentially, when they explain that, well, she does have both, but when she gives birth to herself, essentially, she loses the ability to stay a female and is forced into a sex change. And it is an interesting way that not everybody in the transgender community has the choice to be that way. I'm somebody who's completely neutral to it all. It's I 100% supported. That's not something you want to really talk about in a review, but it's not something that bugs me another way. But from having a limited knowledge as being just a, a traditional straight person, I think they handled it in a way that made me feel for that person,
Mm-hmm.
made me understand what they were going through,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
uh, explained it well enough scientifically to where this person who was who was both but identified as female became a male and then was able to reproduce with himself as herself.
Mm-hmm.
Again, gets really mind bendy, but it all makes sense. It
Mm-hmm.
all works. It's all acted well. It's all explained well.
Mm-hmm.
It's all sympathized well.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there's really no other way to say it. And
Yeah.
you don't want to get into the politics of the
Yeah.
situation, but I loved the character.
Yeah. Yeah.
The character was a person first and foremost, and that's to me, no matter what a gender or religion or whatever or race, whatever you are, it's the person that matters.
Mm-hmm. And
Um, and
I,
that's what I got from it is no matter how you looked at it, the person was a good person
mm-hmm.
and was an enjoyable person. And so the transgenderism of the movie, I guess, just was the element that made the paradox possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I
Um,
completely agree. It was really impressive how they made you uh, feel and empathize with the character. And I think they shed light on some struggles and issues that transgender people go through, self identity. And I think one of the important things that people can take away from it, if you're thinking of sort of issues of gender in society, is how at the level of the soul, we're all the same. Gender is just a physical um, biological shell. But at the gender of our souls, what we are internally, our souls have no gender. And I thought that that was a beautiful thing that they were able to illuminate without bashing you over the head with it. That's one thing that I loved. I love about this movie and this kind of mature writing is that it can transmit these themes and teach these messages and illuminate these things that we struggle with in society, but not in a clumsy, uh, graceless, brutish way. And I think that this is like an example of how you tell these stories and you transmit these messages and you explore these issues that some people find very political and very harsh, and some people are uncomfortable with exploring, but you do it with such craft and such grace that it can't be denied. I think that they really did a very good job, and I'm very surprised that this is not a movie that's touted more as something that should be watched in terms of exploring transgenderism. But also, I mean, obviously that has to do with the fact that it's one of the biggest spoilers of the film. So telling someone that it's about transgenderism or the nature of gender and humanity will be spoiling one of the biggest twists in the movie. So I think it was very, very well done. So I want to speak about another of the important themes. One of the important themes is consequence. There is a consequence, and there's a cost for doing things. And consequence, you can also think of that in terms of the word predestination. Sort of when something happens, something is going to occur as a result of that action, an equal and opposite reaction of karma, so to speak. So I think that about it over the years, I think the the Ouroboros, which is their character, is a result of humanity venturing into time travel in the world of the movie. It's as if they've done something that they shouldn't do. They've flown too close to the sun, and the person who bears the punishment for the quote unquote sin of time travel is they, because they are a tragic figure. By the time you come to the movie and realize what is happening to them, how much pain they've been through in their life, and how they will never know any peace, they have to, be on this time loop and do this over and over again. They are a tragic figure. And I think that they represent a consequence of time travel. Also, the question in the film that talks about, if I could put him in front of you, the man who ruined your life, if I could guarantee you'd get away with it, would you kill him? It's revisited because at the end of the movie, they meet themselves and they're confronted the the chance to do that, and they kill themselves. But the consequence of killing themselves is that they go insane and turn into the instrument of destruction that they've always hated, the instrument of destruction that they've always chased after and despised. And it continues them on this loop, this tragic loop of never being able to escape from this loop of pain and misery and misfortune. So I think that's also another mythological kind of element in the film.
One, it can even be shrunken down into just a much more personal idea that, many times the pain that's caused is self-inflicted pain.
Yeah.
That many of the things we see as injustices against ourselves are caused by ourselves. And if we are confronted with the chance to change that, if we are given that ability to change it, would we? And in the movie, it's a very real, like, if I put this person in front of you, but if you look at that person in the mirror in the real world and you're given the chance to make that change, how many people just go with the flow and don't make that change and just see what happens? And how many people kill that person that they hate, that has inflicted so much pain, and go a different way in their life? How many people look back on that and see that as a worse alternative? I think there's a different way to look at all of this, but it's
I
even
like
on a smaller scale.
I like that interpretation, looking at it as killing yourself,
killing your own demons,
killing your own demons, your own
being the one. You always hurt the ones you love. Well, sometimes that person is yourself. And the character in this, Sarah Snook's character, is just, she grows up alone. She is alone. The only person she loves is herself. And then, through this paradox, through, the events of her life, doesn't realize that the only person that she hates is herself as well. The person who has ruined her life is her, is her future self. And then when it comes to ending that loop and making that change, being able to kill themselves, they feed right back into that loop instead of doing what's necessary to end it.
Ooh, that's deep, because ironically, the way to end the loop is for her not to kill herself in the end. So for the way to kill herself in terms of ending the loop and moving on to a natural death is for her not to physically kill herself in terms of them killing the fizzle bomber.
That's one way of it, but at the same time, when they go back to the point where her male self meets her female self, and he's waiting to kill himself, not realizing that it's himself. He realizes at that moment when they both share the Abe Lincoln line, realizes that he is that person that had created all that grief, and at that moment has the ability to walk away and let her past self live a normal life without all of this happening, but continues to feed that loop. There's multiple times in this paradox where you can end the loop and let time, fall back into line, but you don't. You keep making the same sins over and over, leading to this loop that is endless on your soul.
So I have a question. Where do you lie in the question of, do you think that people are able to change their destinies? Do you think people are able to change themselves, or do you think that we're all predestined and we're all cars, or on the
It's
tracks of destiny? This film
that's
definitely has its own conclusion.
yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that's a hard question to answer because yeah, you got to believe that we all have the ability to make changes to change our future. Um, but the question isn't as much as do we have the ability to, is will we take
Mm,
that ability and
mm,
actually do it, or will we feed our own predestination? Or are we predestined because we are stubborn, because we refuse to do what's necessary to make that change, to
mm,
change our own future?
mm,
uh it's really hard to say without getting into a religious and
mm,
a larger ethereal discussion on what predestination even is.
mhm,
But
mhm,
yes, I mean, I have to believe that we all make our own choices and we all have the ability to make a choice that affects a different future. Not that everything is preordained, and at the end, none of what you did mattered because you're always going to end up at that same spot.
mm.
uh,
I think that's it.
choices will continue to present themselves,
Mhm,
and you have the choice to decide which direction you want to go, but you don't know the end. Where
mhm,
in this movie, the character does know the end,
mhm.
because it always ends up in that same
It's,
spot.
I think that's a beautiful way of looking at it. As I said, it's one of those paradoxes, one of those larger than life questions that we don't know the answer to. One of those things that will always mystify us. One of those things we will always wrestle with. And on some level, we are predestined. For example, like we're predestined to die. We know that one day we're gonna die, but we still keep on living and making choices and trying to make an impact. And we live every moment like we will live forever, but we know that we're going to die. So these are all interesting, larger than life concepts to wrestle with, and I love that we're able to have these discussions from this film. The last one that I'll talk about that I thought was very interesting in terms of predestination, and it's one of the interesting paradoxes in the film, is that the the reason why the Ouroboros exists, why they exist in the film, is another sort of loop that you can't untangle. So the Noah Taylor's character, Mr. Robertson, said that one of the ways that the agency became so good at time travel is because of the Fizzle Bomber, because they had to chase him, they had to travel to different time periods, and he really made them into the force that they are. So their existence feeds into the existence of the time traveling agency, and it's just another of those loops that Mr. Robertson has to put them on the loop, because without them the agency is not able to exist
Do its
as it
work.
is. Yeah, it's another of those mind blowing things. And just I know there's so many layers to this film, and we can talk about it for hours. But we'll end our spoiler discussion there. If there's anything else that you guys have thought of about the film that you want to discuss with us, please feel free to. If you're going to comment in the comment section, be sure to let people know that your discussions or your points will be spoilery, so they can avoid them and they can enjoy the movie in spoiler-free fashion, just as you have. Brandon, is there any last word that you want to say to people before we head out?
uh no, again, yeah, just to reiterate, it's just it's very rare you get to come across a movie in any genre, but let alone science fiction, that leads to debates on religion and existence, and and gender and politics and everything. There, almost everything you can imagine stems from just a simple story of love. uh in this, and yeah, it's just wonderful that a tiny film with just a few $1 million budget was able to do this and slip under the radar, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But it really is. It's just the proof of the art form, that so much can be said in 90 minutes or two. I can't remember how long it was, but let's just say 2 hours is just, we can have a longer discussion than that just talking about it. And if the discussion on the movie is longer than the movie, then I think that the movie did something right.
Yeah, absolutely. To conclude, I'll say that, there are varying degrees of qualities of films, that combination of the intangible beauty of a film and the objective effectiveness of it, combining the elements of sights and sounds, of dialogue, of music, light and dark, and the rhythm of their interplay. But when a film is crafted to such a degree as Predestination, we have to call it a masterpiece, an exemplary creation of what the medium is at its finest. Predestination will leave you dazed and amazed. It will leave you confounded, mystified in the best possible ways. It will stay on your mind for days, for weeks, for years. It's a film that is memorable. I hope that we get more films like this in the future. They're rare and they're very far, between each other, but they are the type of film that makes our love for film worth it. So thank you guys for listening to this spoiler discussion about Predestination. I have been yours truly, Lupe. You can find me on Twitter at LiveLoveLupe. You can find me on Vero, also at LiveLoveLupe. Brandon, where can the people find you on social media to discuss Predestination more with me?
I'm mostly on Twitter at _meatball_84.
All right, and thank you guys for listening. Till next time, stay exiled.